Okay, I'm going to talk a little bit about Ridley Road, a four-part mini-series I watched. I missed the first part on a Saturday night, 8 o'clock or 20 past 8, a bad time in summertime here. There's still daylight saving, and it's not a real opportune time to watch stuff. Um, so I had to watch that on Daily Motion, the first episode, and bonjour to our French friends at Daily Motion. Thank you for that. And this really took me by surprise. It's a historical fiction based on real events, but fictionalized, sort of spruced up a bit. So it's not a straight documentary, and I really liked it. I thought it was a really well made, and there's a lot of tension. I think the last episode sort of drifted along, and there was a few little unusual elements in that, and I sort of the last episode wasn't the best. The second and third ones were really good, and the first one sort of just sets everything up, and it's quite good. And the finale, the final scene, was a little bit silly, and that was mentioned in a couple of the reviews, including by the Judas guy, Joseph Finlay. He mentioned that he didn't like it at all, and I can understand where he's coming from. I did like it a bit, and I thought it was a bit better than how he described it. And it describes a period that I didn't really know anything about. This early 60s, 1960s fascist little mini revival in Britain is something I just didn't know anything about. And I've read a lot of books, and I haven't read history for a long time, but I just didn't. It isn't part of any sort of culture in the popular culture. This has just been wiped out. I did know about Enoch Powell, the Rivers of Blood speech a few years later, late '68, I think that was. And he was a Tory, and that was a big deal because it's a Tory. But this is a little bit different. This is not as well known as outside Britain, at least. And it was a little bit sort of disturbing. And um, the kind of Britain it represents is very different. See, the early 60s is presented as a time of just swinging 60s, women in miniskirts, Beatlemania, and just that sort of thing. It's presented as a very different way, but the way this London was portrayed in this, it's very different, very dark and ugly, and very streets. You can just by watching it, you can see what I mean. It's a very different sort of portrayal at all. It's not very sexually liberating. The main actress, the main protagonist, the young woman, she's sort of sexually harassed in the streets on numerous occasions, often by old men, ugly fat old men. And there's a lot of that, and there's a lot of very mean and ugly sort of people in it. And it's a different sort of representation, a very darker representation than we have seen. So I did like that. It was more gritty and real and more realistic, I think, than maybe just an Austin Powers sort of thing, shagadelic. And it wasn't all fun and games and party and that. But um, and you see the main character, they try to infiltrate these Jewish Antifa guys who are actually sort of Antifa, not just whatever Antifa is today. These actually do that, and they're quite good at it. They seem professional, but she's not. She's just a rank amateur, and she shouldn't probably have been put in that situation. But they used her as a bit of a honey trap, and she was sent into his mansion, very unprepared. And you could see what was going to happen. and she's sort of enamored of him. He's got a woman, horrible, just based on Coco Chanel, I think, somewhat. And I think it was a real woman, but sort of little bits of reality and fiction mixed in together. And she was sent in to try to infiltrate and plant devices. And, she's sort of interested, and he's interested in her. She had to dye her hair blonde. She had dark hair, then dyed it blonde. And he took a shine to her, and there was sort of an inevitable sort of romantic sort of friction there. And yeah, and it was sort of a poor decision, but it was sort of a cavalier decision to send her in a rank amateur. Her boyfriend, her ex-boyfriend, was doing the same work, and they met a few times, and it goes on like that. And there's a lot of subterfuge, a lot of sort of slightly unbelievable. They seem to be able to walk around his large home just at will, and that's slightly odd. They seem to be able to get away with a few things that they probably wouldn't have gotten away with in real life, but um, it's very good. And then things go wrong, of course, and it's a very different sort of series to what you might expect. It's a very dark view of Britain of that time. It really does change your view, the common view, the commonly presented view as a time of just party and Beatlemania, as I said, and different sorts of things. But Judas guy did a review, and I didn't really agree with it. He wanted it to be just a fight fest between Nazis and Antifa guys. He wanted just 4 episodes of rumbling in the streets, and I can understand that, but there's got to be a bit more of a character development. It had Oberyn. She was one of the Antifa women. She was really good, and poor old Tracy, she was very good, and Eddie Marson, who was also part of the anti-Corbyn thing, he was very good. He was very well cast. He was a very interesting character. He was in the Antifa things, fighting the Nazis, but he's also an anti-black racist. He didn't like black people, and he was anti-socialist. He censored himself as an entrepreneur with his little cab business, and good on him. But he was sort of intolerant of more egalitarian policies. He's maybe a little bit like a Alan Sugar type of person, a little man with a very angry little man. But he's an interesting character. He is complex. You like a complex character. Eddie Marsden's character, and the black guy who's racist too. He should have been in it more. He was sort of the hero that was never sort of developed. The mixed race bloke, and that was another flaw in the episode, in the series. Just a lack of development of him. He could have been a bigger character. He would have been probably a better hero. Sort of a little bit unbelievable in parts, but I did like it. I thought it was very good, and I don't know. I think the Judas guy he's I don't really like his view. He didn't really seem to grasp it at all. He seemed to see it as a Brexit thing. I know there's a Brexit thing. There's sort of a little bit of a Brexit angle to it, but I didn't really see that at all. And he also associated sort of Corbyn with it, and because of Marsan and Oban. But yeah, I wasn't really fussed by his review at all. At Do You Think? But I have to say, I did like this show, and it did open my eyes to a couple of things. The fascist revival I'd never heard of. Um, I was completely sort of a bit shocked by that. It's completely sort of gone underground and never mentioned. I did. There's a TV show, Picket Fences, which was very well awarded on many awards, and I used to watch that in the 90s, and it didn't get particularly high ratings, but it was a critic's choice. And I made mention of this on Twitter. There's no mention of it. It sort of just occurred and ran for a few seasons and disappeared. Nobody mentions it. No, there's no memes or no. It made no cultural impact. Picket Fences. You watch a few episodes if you can find them. It's quite an interesting show. It's very quirky and unusual. I think Tom Skerritt, his acting was the low point in that. I thought his constant pained expressions, like he needed to maybe go to the toilet, was a little bit off-putting. But the show was interesting and quirky and weird. Really good show, but it's had no cultural impact at all. Nobody talks about it, and I used to love it. It used to be on Tuesday night, Channel 10 here in Australia in the early to mid 90s when I was a bit younger, a lot younger, but I really enjoyed it. It's very, and this same with this 60s mini fascist revival in Britain has made no cultural impact. That's the first. I didn't. If Ridley Road didn't exist, if I hadn't seen the show, I wouldn't even know it had happened. And this was a big deal. They're having huge rallies, and there's British Pathé footage of the riots, tens of thousands of people, and people getting hurt. And this was a major movement which was largely ignored, and it hasn't made any cultural impact at all. It's very strange. Understand why. Why the Anglos would keep this quiet, I can completely understand that. But it is unusual for something to have no resonance at all in the modern world, even a little bit, nothing at all. But I did like the show. The ending was a little bit silly. You can watch it yourself, but I thought it was good, and I would recommend it. I don't think Joseph Finlay's opinion was very good, but I don't agree with him on much. He's a very funny man. The Judas people, they're very funny, but I don't think he's on the mark here. That's it. Do you think? Might make brief mention of Do you think? Keith Kahn Harris is slightly involved in that. A guy called Nathan Abrams, a movie expert, a university lecturer, Welsh, quite a smart man. He's behind that too. He's written some very interesting things there. And jewthink.org, I think, is where you find Finlay's review. And there's some interesting stuff there, even for Gentiles like myself. It's well worth reading. And Ridley Road, well worth watching. Some problems at the end, but it's good. I recommend it.